Hello and welcome to Mod Kit Mayhem. This week we're building the Hawker Siddeley Harrier GR.1. What can I say about this kit? It's a great little starter kit, and the set I bought is exactly that. It has the paint and glue and paint brushes. You can build it pretty much straight from the box. I thought this would be a good challenge, and just like the Spitfire, rather than using just standard artist acrylic paints, this time I'd use the actual paints that Airfix give you just to see how it actually works out. This video now will be the building part, and then next week I'll be doing the paint part of the process. Hopefully we'll get a nice little model kit. On opening the box you get the usual grey plastic kit and instructions, decals and everything else you need, and then the paint and the glue is actually on the outside of the box. The kit has been retooled, so the panel lines are recessed. Not like the old kits that used to have panel lines where they were kind of sticking upwards. So it was the same with Spitfire. Spitfire had a really nice panel lines to it. That's the difference between new and old kits. When you get an old kit you'll see that the panel lines are actually not recessed. So there you go, there's all the parts, quite a few detail parts. And on the whole it's a fairly simple kit, and shouldn't really tax anybody who's done kits before, or even if you're starting out, this is your first build. I started by using a knife, but I quickly found that was shaking the camera, so I had to use some clippers. My kind of goal with this kit was to try and do as much of the actual build as simple as possible and not go back to my sort of usual tools, just keep it basic. But I did have to cheat a little bit in the end, and I'll tell you later why that is. But at the start I just tried to keep it as simple as possible, so everything you'd have at home anyway. You start with a seat, and it's quite a detailed one. You can glue the side panels on, which you didn't used to in old kits. And then it's the cockpit as usual. Using the kit glue is quite a challenge, especially if you're used to kind of more sort of specialised glues. The best way I could do it, I think, was to put some glue onto some plastic, or I used paper here but it wasn't very good, so I had to find some plastic in the end, and sharpen an old matchstick or stick that you've got. I think I used barbecue sticks for this, and then use them, dip them in the glue, and then apply the glue using the stick to the object, and that way you can get a much more precision application. But yeah, so do that if you can. It's a lot easier than just using the tube. You can see how well the cockpit goes together. It's got a few parts that make it a little bit more complex than the older kits. I didn't bother with the pilot heat. I don't know, I just preferred it without it, but you can glue that guy in if you want. For me, I quite like the idea of opening the canopy and having the cockpit, you can actually see into it. So you can see I've moved on to clippers there to stop the camera shake. I apologise about the earlier stuff. I hadn't noticed until I played it back that every time I cut a piece off, it shook the camera. Right, painting. This is a bit of a hack. I didn't undercoat the inside of the cockpit. Now that's probably a no-no in most cases, and you would put an undercoat spray on there. But for this kit, I just wanted to just crack on as if you were doing it with the simple amount of stuff possible. Although I will use a spray for the actual outside of the aircraft for next week's video. For this part, I just applied it straight on from the pot, just to see what happened really, and it is possible. The first thing that happens is you'll see some waxing, so the paint will sort of not settle properly on the surface. Most places it will, but on the other place it won't, so all you have to do is a second coat. And the most important thing with the Humbrol paint, these acrylic Humbrol paints, is to water them down. Do not use them straight from the pot because they're so thick they will ruin the kit. Really definitely get a bit of water and just mix them up to a point where they will apply, but they are thinner and not too thick. You can see there in the pot how thick the actual paint is. It's incredible, thicker than enamels, so I definitely would water it down. Here you see me painting the green seat covers. And I pre-painted the turbine black, as the instructions said, on the sprue, and then cut that after. If you've painted over where the glue is going to need to be applied, just scrape it off with a knife, and then the parts will fit better and glue together properly. So you see I've also painted the dark grey into the intake area because it's such a big area and you can see that straight away, so it's definitely worth putting some paint in there. Again, using the stick to apply the glue, much more precise. The parts all fitted really nice, there was no big issues. A couple of things I had to kind of cut down, but I'll explain about them later. But on the whole, everything fitted really well. It's always worth dry fitting parts. You know, if you're unsure whether it's going to fit, just put it on there without any glue and see if it all lines up, and then if you need to sort of shave a little bit of the plastic off with a knife, then you can do that and make it fit properly, just to make things a little bit less stress for yourself. I'm terrible for forgetting and I just go crack on and then I put myself into a really bad corner and have to kind of make more of a mess trying to clean up the part that I've already glued on. So yeah, dry fit if you can. It's a good habit to get into. The decals aren't too bad for the cockpit, they're worth putting the extra time on in terms of getting them right. They are a little bit big, so you have to kind of just have them hanging over ever so slightly, but that didn't affect me too much. On the instructions it tells you to paint inside the wheel bay. I think it's because it's a lot trickier to get in there once it's all together, so that's worth doing. You know, get the lighter grey paint and apply that inside the wheel bay area. That's just behind the cockpit. So it's time to glue the two halves together. It's relatively painless to get to this point. You know, the painting is the bit that slows you down the most. You know, you can put as much time to that as you want. The two halves of the hull go together really fine. Just make sure you're putting pressure all along the hull so that you don't have any gaps. Double check that everything's lined up properly before the glue dries. I must admit, I do prefer my other glues. Using this was a bit of a challenge, but that's what I wanted while I was doing this video, is just to make it almost as if I was building it on the kitchen table, as it were. Kind of set some parameters and as a limit. Be easy just to get all the other tools out and, you know, and crack on. And although I had to do a little bit at the end just so that I had time to edit this video, on the whole most of this kit is built literally from the box with a couple of tools that I had. The tail fits fine as well, that goes on beautifully. There's no issues there whatsoever. It's a really nice little kit, this, and the tail was really nicely done. Very thin and it just snapped into place lovely. A little bit of just jiggling just to get it right, but once it was in, it looked really good. And the same with the wings. The wings just plonk down into the central section. Very limited amount of work to get to that part. So next was the pylons. These were a bit more tricky. They didn't fit as well as they should have, so had to shave down a little bit of the plastic that goes into the wing, just a bit, so that they fitted properly, and even then they weren't exactly right, but it was enough for the kit. And then the engine nozzles, they come in two halves, so you glue them together. Found that if you put them as if they're pointing down and then turn them back on themselves, 90 if you're having them up, and they seem to pop in a bit better then. And then rotate them to where you want them. Also, don't get them mixed up because they are two different types. The back one is different to the front one, so don't accidentally glue the wrong one in. The side intakes, they're very easy. Now the wheels, these were a little bit more tricky. You kind of have to think about this a little bit because the way the wheels are done, they've been deflated so that they'll sit, so it looks like the aircraft's got some pressure on them, you know, in terms of weight. So you have to make sure they're in the correct position, but you've got the front wheel, the middle wheel, and the two wheels that sort of sit on the end of the wing. So you have to do it in a certain way where when it sits there, it hasn't dried, and then you get the kind of the flat part looking wrong. I decided that the best part was to glue the middle wheel on first and then just get them lined up as quick as possible. Once you've done that, quickly move on to the front wheel, and then don't glue the wheel into the actual part. And once they were in position, I then went onto the outer wheels, and they give you a good balancing point, and then you can go onto the front. But I kept the front wheel loose so that I could line it up properly. Because you see how the jet sits, it sits slightly back. so it's a little bit tricky to line up. So you try and leave a little bit of leeway in terms of being able to adjust it to get it right. And also then gun packs. Now these didn't fit as well either, so I drilled out, and that's probably where I started cheating. I used the drill tool. But to be honest, I think you could have just cut the little sort of nodules that actually go into the body, cut them back ever so slightly and they would line up better. So I could have done that without drilling it. And then quickly I went on to the weapons and external fuel tanks. So the rocket pods. So I glued them on white glue so I can take them off after and hand paint them. And then you have the head-up display that goes in fine, but be careful that you don't leave it too high because it stops the front canopy sitting down if you leave it too high. So make sure it's down enough that it doesn't hit the canopy, and then you can glue the canopy on. And there's nothing really tricky about that other than watching that you don't get any glue on it. Keep your fingers away from the glue. So there it is. I hope you enjoyed the video. It's a very quick build and I hope you can build it yourself. There's a link down below which is part of the affiliate program for Amazon. If you can get your kit through there, that would help me out massively, so that's worth doing if you can. And like and subscribe, that also helps me massively on YouTube. I've had a lot of new subscribers and it's been great really seeing the numbers grow, so I'm really chuffed with that. Thank you very much for watching. Check the video out for next week where we paint this kit. Take care. Cheers.